I think the very important things we have seen that not really happening from even world leaders and countries leaders. It's the matter of recognizing that we're living crisis. Some of the world leaders even actually took very time to recognize that the crises were there, whether it was the current crisis we're living in or the previous financial crisis. And that has kind of devastating effects on their respective countries, economies, and even what you call the companies the leaders were running. And I think one of the testimonial things that because we're living in UAE, we have great leaders. They have early on recognized what to do and what action to be put in place. So I think the very important first thing is, how do we recognize that there are crises as early on, and then things follows later on. Of course, there isn't one solution which fits all the countries or all the organizations. They vary. And I think if we sit to talk about it, there'll be, I think, hours and hours of discussion. However, given in the interest of time and the webinar over here, probably I would be able to summarize at least in the key 5 points. And one would be that the leaders sometimes they believe because they have a lot of past experiences and during crisis, they believe they'll be able to do it and cut it themselves. And this is where statistics show many times that that is not the right approach. The best approach would be, it's actually creating network of teams. So you actually go to your organization, see the people who have the relative experience, who are actually touched to the ground, and build the team who would be your crisis team to manage the crisis. So that is the very important aspect. I actually call it the nervous system. It's like the body, we have the spinal cord, which this job is to communicate between the brain, and the signal brain is giving it to your limbs and vice versa. So your nervous system and the cycle you create in the organization by having this network of teams, their job becomes, how do they communicate between the employees and the senior management, and becomes a very small, a quick link between them. So that is the first option. So how do we define this network of teams? So they have relatively good experience. They should be adaptable. They should be able to contract, and they should be able to expand when situations are necessary. And they should be able to renegotiate and redo things differently. And that's very important. So they need to be very agile. And I think their main focus would be that they are, or the domain of action they need to look at is, first of all, how do I safeguard my workforce today? Because the people are the most important factors in the whole thing. And probably we'll dwell upon how do we actually manage people as well. So that would be the most important domain for them to manage. The second would be, how do we manage and stabilize I would say, the chain supply? Any organization would have any sort of chain supply, have to actually make sure that that's taken care of, because you have clients you're going to talk to, you have your suppliers giving you the information, and you have to make sure this pipe is working, because the supply chain could be hard, could be soft, could be anything. So it could be any soft products or hard products as well. The third important thing they need to talk about is to carry out the financial stress testing. The company would have a limited cash flow sometimes, and you need to find out what do you need to do at this time. So go back and check and make a scenario analysis and look at things. If the cash I have, how long will it last me, or various scenarios I need to do? How do I work out a different discount or deferral or a postponement in payment with my vendors, with my suppliers? And the other important factors and domain that this nervous system will need to worry about is the client and customers. How do I open my communication channels to them, and I keep on continually talking to them and make it happen? So this would be the second most important factor, is how do you make sure that you have a good nervous system which is actually taking care of the organization and moving forward from it. Of course, the other points comes to my mind as well. And one of the very critical one is the communication. The statistics shows that whenever we speak, regardless how important the message is, even if we're during crisis, it says only 1/3 of the people are listening to you. The other 2/3 are not listening, or they're distracted, or there's something else in their mind. And it's even more proven to be correct during crisis time, because people are still struggling with their chemical reaction happening in their mind, what's going to happen to them. So they are having mixed messages, and that's why they're not listening to you. So that's why they reiterate the fact, and they say, over-communicate during these times. Make sure that the channel of communication is open with your people. Have that thing, rapport, done very, very quickly, as early as possible. Because we've seen also world leaders, and without mentioning names of these countries, that some of the leaders of the countries actually delayed what you call communicate with people. So that led to chaos and led a lot of people think of different things, and rumors have started seeping in and have created a ripple effect in terms of how the companies need to manage their organization and even countries as well. So the timely communication and effective communication and constant communication make sure the message is going on. To be honest with you, I can share a simple example I lived with when I was in Dubai Bank. And this has happened during the financial crisis of 2008. And given we were relatively a very small bank, somehow roughly less than 1,000 employees. So we were like a kind of a flash news happening only by Dubai Bank that this is a bank which is going to be sold out. It's a bank that's going to either be acquired or merged or something. So all the employees were living this uncertainty that tomorrow we wake up and we may not have a job. Most of us thought of that way. But the way we turned it around, it was, honestly speaking, hats off to the CEO of the company at that point of time and the people, the management staff we had. We were kind of the nervous system. It was literally, we've created the nervous system. How do you communicate with the leaders of the company and the rest of the staff? And one of the important things we created, which was really hats off to him, it's how do we communicate effectively and how do we do over communication to the extent when the CEO of the company used to receive any information on what we're working on, even at 8 o'clock at night, he would call all of us. And if it was possible, then we would actually come and physically meet at 9 o'clock at night. So we would leave everything and go and meet. And it happened very often. And trust me, that kind of built a lot of confidence in us on what's happening. So we were at least clear. So we had clarity and transparency. The following day, when we landed up to the organization, we exactly did the same thing. The first thing in the morning we did, the messages which has happened by our CEO, we resonated it back to our employees. So employees also appreciated that. Mind you that the fear of losing the job did not go away, but they kept on being engaged. To the extent when we used to run surveys of staff engagement, and not only staff satisfaction, but staff engagement is something a little bit high of level, is to really engage how people are involved in getting things done. In 2010, 2012, the average score by what you call corporation and by banks, local banks, were around 60 to 62%. We were scoring almost every year above 70%. That shows, despite the uncertainty that people were living in, and because of effective communication, of course, many other things we were doing as well, people were really engaged. People were coming in knowing that something going to happen, but they were very engaged in working out and getting things done. So communication has been very, very effective. One of the other important things, number 3, I would say, is how do you manage the morale of people? How do you manage the emotions people are going through? And the effective way for the leaders to do it, and seldomly they forget to do that because they believe that they're very powerful and they'll get to do it, is the leaders to recognize themselves that they're human beings as well. They also have sets of feelings, emotional reaction happening to them, chemical reaction happening to their brain as well. The faster they recognize that, the faster they'll be able to understand what needs to be done. Only then they'll be able to communicate with the people. They'll have an open door policy. They'll be understanding the emotion of people, and they recognize where their people are going professionally, personally, and what's going to happen with their loved ones. Because the way they know that the uncertainty they have among themselves, okay, don't knowing what's going to happen to me, is the same sets of questions that the employees are asking. So once I, as a leader, or we as leaders, recognize that, I know what my people are thinking and going through at that point of time. I can keep on going on. There are other points. So if you have any other questions before I move on.
But Maher, great points. But you know, communication is key, because you need to be connected. And when there's uncertainty and fear and so on, we all come up with like the worst ideas, the worst scenarios, with you name it. So what do you communicate at this point? Do you communicate exactly what's happening where we are? Do you communicate the problems, or do you only communicate solutions? What do you communicate in leadership?
Sure. The key word on communication would be transparency. It's very difficult to camouflage things when things are happening, but leaders need to be careful at the same time. We cannot be, many of the leaders, what they do, they sell over optimistic messages and actually not recognizing the need of the hour and what's happening today. So when we over promise and over optimize, many people recognize that there's something different is happening. So you're actually selling a wrong thing. So what happens to the credibility of leaders at this point of time is getting diminished. So it's very important, before you even communicate, we talked about the first point, that you have to have your nervous system, your network of teams. The job of the network of teams is to assess the situation, because they're actually more close to the ground. So they bring the information back to these leaders, and then the leaders will actually transparently communicate this information. So it's a two-way flow. They cannot just think of their experience will be able to handle it. It's not about experience now. It's all about the character they bring about managing this situation through transparency.
Yeah. So, you know, when we first were going through this, you know, March, April, and a bit of May, you know, the havoc and so on, but now things have settled in with people. You know, we went through the classic cycle of denial, and then, you know, didn't know what to happen and so on. Now people are dealing with it, trying to problem solve and so on. You know, what do we, you know, how are, from your experience, how are we going to be handling it? Because, you know, the anticipation about what's going to happen economically in the recession, the turn down, you know, the downturn of the economy, and you know, let's face it, a lot of people are, and a lot of businesses might not be around anymore. People are struggling with, you know, decreased revenues, or overnight their revenue has, you know, revenue stream has stopped. They're trying to figure out if they're still in the right industry. They're trying to, you know, to see what they can do to decrease their costs, what they can do with their teams, and so on. But the realities are, people are grappling with possible job loss, or people who have been asked to leave their jobs, businesses who are trying to shrink and trying to figure out growth. You know, how do we handle all of that?
It is definitely very challenging, and the tough decision need to be made, unfortunately. I'm currently advising a group of companies, and they've got really versatile, I would say, jobs. They're varying from management of metro stations and the servicing of these metro stations. They have what we call a software company. They have a real estate company, and they have also environmental companies as well. We're doing so. It's really versatile, and the challenge in every single company is different, but they're all interrelated, to be honest with you. And one of the things we early on did is what I personally learned from my previous crisis when I was back in Dubai Bank, and we exactly did the same thing. We brought the people, and we tried to create the network of teams, and we asked them. And while this is a family office, but you know, they have really talented people. So while we thought with our experience we know what to be done, but these talented people, they actually taught us what is the right thing to be done for the company. So I'll give you an example. The very first thing we thought of as leaders of the company, including the chairman and some of the executive, they thought of actually saying it, okay, we will cut the workforce by 30%. However, and we will defer the salaries so we can stay afloat, because if we don't do that, we'll go bust, and it's going to be very difficult for us to survive, because we're all related to the economy. When we post these, what we call solutions to the respective companies' leaders, they told us, hold on, give us a day, let us think about it. We'll come back to you with a solution. And they came back to me with an amazing solution. So that made the thing, so respective companies, with the exception of maybe one, but all the other 3 companies or 33 verticals were there. This is, okay, this is gonna be my new business model. This is what I'm going to do. Where I'm going to introduce a new product, which is required now, which is, for example, disinfection. Of course, I'm mentioning an example which not many companies would have the luxury to do something similar. But sure, this is the company where it says, okay, I'm into this line of business of environmental, but I'm going to create a disinfection products. I'm going to start selling them. And honestly speaking, in that previous month, which was month of April and May, the contribution of that sales they were proven to be correct. It actually became the 30% of the revenue, which earlier used to be almost close to 1 or 2%. So they said, look, leave it on us. We will prove to you that we'll bring in this much revenue from this kind of line of business we have. And then we will end up keeping all the staff. However, to stay afloat, we will defer part or percentage of the salary for the coming months, which everybody agreed on. Another company says, okay, we'll look into things which we've not in the past, because during the period where we all sitting home, I'm trying to avoid to use the word lockdown, because I honestly did not even hear our leaders using this word in UAE. I'm talking about because they were very careful in actually coining it to say disinfection period, which tells me that there was a team who were thinking about how even to communicate. So that's a hats off to them. So even within our company, we were trying to avoid the use of the word lockdown. So we said, okay, during this disinfection period, we had a lot of time. The company has a lot of time. So they said, okay, what are the things I can do differently, which I used to do it manually before? So they started automating their processes. So they says, this automation lead to us, okay, how fast we can go to the clients of where we can deal with. So they kind of reduce expenses. But in that particular company, they had to make a little bit of tough decisions where this is, okay, those people who in the bottom line in terms of performances, which they were actually keeping all this along, this is, okay, we had to let them go. But then it was not really a damaging situation. But the reason I give this example is like, what I was trying to say is every company has different way of handling it. There isn't one suit which will fit everybody all. Takes the biggest example of airline industries. Airline industries would hit the most, followed by what we call energy industry, hotel industry. Now, that means the layoff's going to happen. So how the leaders need to, I know what you call Emirates Airline, for example, did, and this is what we did to some of the people we talked about. And the answer would actually go into two groups. The group of people, you know that you're going to tell them goodbye, and the group of people who are going to stay in the company as well. When we met with everybody, and we have transparently told everybody how and what the situation of the company is. If we do not make these decisions, this is going to be the status of the company, i.e. the entire company will end up being closed. However, if you make this decision now by deferring salaries for most of your staff for a period of 2 or 3 months, and some of the people who are not performing to go, then we will stay afloat for almost 1 year period. So everybody was excited, not excitement out of joy, but excited saying, okay, at least we'll get our jobs. We'll have that happen. So people stayed. So the people who left, it was also clear to them, and they were dealt in a very professional manner, and they understood why we're doing these things. And some of them really recognized why we were doing that. So again, communication. The people who stayed, always the fear would still monger in them. So it's very important that we constantly communicate to them, because you know what will happen? The moment we have downturns and we take a salary deferral or a cut, or people go, they know the situation isn't over, because we're still living the crisis. A lot of people talk about the second wave. God knows how it's going to happen and how big it's going to be. So the fear is there in their mind. So what we thought of actually engaging them into the company decision making, and how do we reshape the company. So because we had time, so we indulged them in making new ways of dealing with this company. So they started thinking now out of the box of making something new. So now started the more belongingness have become into the company with what they were working on.
Yeah. So it's fantastic when leaders approach things the right way. The crisis becomes an opportunity to engage and to actually gain more loyalty rather than the other way around. And I think there's a myth about, it's equally hard for people who are being let go of. I think also that, the burden of letting somebody go is as equally as hard. That conversation is not an easy one. And that decision actually is a very heavy one for leaders.
True, I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that is where leaders come into play. But again, I repeat, leaders along themselves cannot make these decisions. And it's a proven example we lived, where they need to rely on the teams they work with, so they can feed them with information. And a lot of people think that when we create these crisis management teams, they're only to look at what's happening now, and then once the responses are there, they should be dissolved and we move on. And this is where a lot of people, leaders, make mistakes, because the crisis actually evolves quite a lot. So that's why one of the 5 pillars, and one of the things we need to do, leaders need to do, is also assess the situation. Because of the team we created, the team's supposed to go back and assess the situation at different intervals. So they pause, they anticipate, they assess, and they go and act upon the information. So because the situation keeps on evolving, I mean, the current pandemic we lived in, it had different impact for different countries. So they had to actually make different decisions at different interval of times. I think UAE is an example. We had a disinfection for a period of time. Then when things have evolved, the decision was made, the disinfection periods should go longer. And when they think things have been improved upon, so that means they collected more data. So they came back with different information and different action. They said, okay, now slowly we'll open up certain activities, certain amusement things for people to go and activate. Then we realized more data has been collected by the government, whom we work with quite a lot. And then they made another information saying, okay, now you can go to the malls. Now the elderly can also go to the malls. Now even the children can go to the mall. So you see, the stepwise approach tells you this is one of the decision-making pillars. You cannot make one decision and you stick to it. The decisions has to evolve as the situation evolves. For the situation to evolve, for you to know that thing, the team you have created, they have to constantly go and pick up this data and collect this data. And that data should be feeding back of what need to be done. So, you know, and that was the most important thing to be do as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the timeliness of how quickly you can turn this around is critical, because you can't just sit down and just wait on it and wait until there's a lapse of time. The quicker you react, or actually not you, the quicker you act upon the data that you have is important. So Maher, I wanted to ask you about 2 things before we open it up to everyone who's on this call. I wanted us to talk about taking this from an organization or a business point of view, because we're talking about leadership and the 5 pillars, applying it on an individual basis, right? So we have, the people on this call and so on. How do we make it work for us in our lives? Can we take these 5 points and actually apply it on an individual basis?
Yes and no. Yes, I would say, first of all, I think we need to reflect on it, first of all, personally. Yeah. How do we mend some of the relationships that we have? Suddenly we don't have time. Now we had a luxury of plenty of times that we can reflect back in ourselves. And what do we need to do differently? One of the things I learned is that we had very little time for our families. And I think in previous seminars and many webinars I've attended, this has been reflected quite a lot, because I think this was the most compelling thing, that some of the relationship, while being there, but it was not as strong that we thought we were. The relationship with your spouse, the relationship with your children, the relationship with your friends, and you started communicating with them actually like the webinars we are doing through phones and all these things. So I think the first important thing that we started communicating more often. Yeah. When we never had the time, we were so busy with our work and we did not communicate. And the moment you actually have some time, even if there were no crisis and you're in the office, you'll just think about it and you pause. It says, okay, let me call that friend I've never talked to for a long time, which I've meant to call. So this crisis actually also taught us, okay, we need to communicate more often, and this is what happens. And we started communicating really quite a lot, which we could not do before. So yes, we can definitely apply at varying levels all the different pillars and how can we do things. The other point, which I did not dwell a lot about it, but it's how to stay kind of deliberately calm. So leaders are also required that when they actually speak and communicate and they make decisions, it's important they are level-headed. And they're not very excited about making an announcement, because that what you call being level-headed, it's very, very important. And how you can reflect personally as well at home. I know a lot of people could complain that you're locked down with again, I'm using the word lockdown, which I'm trying to avoid. You're actually at your home, and you're seeing your family more often. Yeah. So sometimes the tension do increase, because we're human beings, we're this happening. But honestly speaking, I found it because I had quite a lot of time out of my family because I've been working quite a lot. So I had very little time to see them. I created activities which I wanted to do all in the before, and I could not do them. So I started creating those activities with them. So even my decision making with them have become quite different. And not only that, I also involve them in the decision making process, saying, so this is, I want to do, what about yourself? So so when you talk about the nerve system, my children became my nerve system. So they would tell me, okay, this is what we want to do. So now I'm relying on their decisions with what they want to do, with what I want to do. So that was very important. And optimism, as I said earlier, was required, but I think bonded optimism during crisis are very, very important. So you actually combine optimism with realism. And like, you know, this is how you reflect back at home as well. And I'm sure there are many ways of applying that as well. Because, you know, you may have different things required to be done, but, you know, realistically, we cannot do things when we are sitting in the confinement of home.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's very insightful and useful, actually. But yeah, definitely with the social distancing, I think we became even more connected than ever before. And, you know, consulting people around us, I think, is key. And doing that more and more in business and life, I think, also is a skill that needs to be sharpened. The other area that, you know, we always talk about is with the changes that are happening, you know, and even before COVID-19, we've been talking a lot in 2019 and parts of 2018, entrepreneurship all over the world, I think, and small and medium businesses, nobody can dispute that they are the, you know, the backbone or the spine of any economy and any growth going forward. But, you know, the conversations about being an entrepreneur and the dreams of being an entrepreneur and that conversation has been upped even now, even more than before. And I say that with caution, because whenever I have this conversation with people who want to hop on the entrepreneurship wagon, if you would like, just because we're out of a job and so on, it's not an easy thing. It's not the solution. It's not, you know, it's not the thing to do if you are not capable, if you're not prepared for what's happening next. But I think definitely building a new, you know, entrepreneurship is with us to stay. And I think it's going to be a vital sector of the economy. And I was so happy to read one of the structures, the new restructuring in the economy. One of the ministers of the economy is going to be just focusing on SMEs, which is so vital for us. But with a crisis like this, the most hard hit are the small businesses. So, you know, what's your advice to small business owners who are, you know, hard hit? Do we just pack and, you know, do they pack and leave? Do they stay in it for the long haul? Is there a light at the end of the tunnel?
This is the most difficult question, Salma, to be honest with you, to answer anybody, because I agree with you. In US, the SME consists to be 86% of the US business and workforce. Yeah. And the percentage vary across the globe between 60 to 80%. In UAE, it is anything between 70 to 80%. And what you've mentioned, it was really very nice of UAE government to focus, because they understand the importance of SME sector, because it's not only a backbone, but it's really a front runner when economy comes and revive. When economies or crisis comes upon and hit, as you have mentioned rightfully, they are the first sectors to be hit. So we heard about a lot of companies closing down, but not only that, at these crises, we also heard big firms in US, you know, have been also filing for bankruptcy. A lot of companies have been there for 100 plus years. They have been filing for bankruptcies and they're just going under. So this crisis actually have been very stronger for everybody, because you'd had the entire world kind of on a freeze. What do we do next? And I think it's $1 million question, to be honest with you. It's not an easy one. It's all about what industry you are in. Unless entrepreneurs are ready to change industries and want to explore new things, it might be a bit difficult. One thing we can think of is, and we were trying to explore this with a couple of entrepreneurs who came to us for advice, and we were actually studying their business model, each one of them separately. And what we said, look, we see synergies in what you have and what you had earlier, and we see different synergies over here. So why don't you guys actually partner up rather than starting alone, and come up with something, and we can come up and model for you that you can probably start all over again with these things, because you bring kind of a good experience and you bring good experience over here, and we can mix and match your products and make it happen. So during this crisis, as we speak, we actually secured funding for them. And because the business model was very good and people understood and appreciated that, and we gathered the funding and they started off running. So we created something like a $500,000 dirham, and they're working as we speak, so we're getting in. So ideas like that would be very important. So it's going to be a collaborative effort. Maybe, probably, perhaps alone, it will be very difficult to do. Some people will actually recoup and will understand and change the business model. So entrepreneurs who are still alive, I think this is the best chance that they do three things very quickly and very correctly. Relook at the business model, reassess the business model, see what can be done differently, what new products that they need to launch to aid a new revenue stream. How do they change the revenue stream of some of the existing product by tweaking it, by making some additional revenue from that thing? That would be number one. Number two would be, and which is extremely important, I always advocate people that you should do it regardless whether the crisis or not, but because people are so happy in making revenue sometimes, or they're so busy in firefighting, so they can't ignore. It's how do you automate and use the technology? Yeah. Use that to your best, because today we're living in 21st century, things are moving and actually evolving. So it's very important that you use the technology and automate. Try to create platform where you have a stronger reach of your products to the clients. So rather than having only B2C, you probably could have B2B depending on the business model you have. So you can evolve coming up new ideas. So that's number two. Number three, and it's also paramount, that you have the right set of people in your team. Yeah. Perhaps maybe this is the time to reflect. If I was in a foxhole today, if I was in a dire situation, who do I need to be next to me? Who can save me out? Yeah. So that is a very key thing, that to make sure that you have right set of people, like-minded people. When I say like-minded, not necessarily thinking like me, but they have the same vision, same way of doing it, same passion of getting things done. So if we think of these three cornerstones, I think people can evolve and change along. And the ideas I mentioned of how do we collaborate among different business leaders, not necessarily I need to make it alone. Maybe it's a time that I need to collaborate with someone else and join hands with another business or a third business as well, and then I can move forward.
Absolutely. I mean, that's very, very valuable. And I think, partnership in times of crisis, and making sure that we leverage all of each other's strength and complementary nature it's completely key. And I'm going to open it up for everybody, if you would like to unmute yourself and join us in this conversation, because this is very, very enlightening. Because I think right now, in times of crisis, and especially now, it's time for what I call a brave leadership. Whether you are we're all leaders in our own lives. And I think bravery at this point in time, being bold in taking decisions, being bold, and sometimes we hesitate a lot because we don't want to make that call, because we don't want to ask for help of anybody, make it. This time is, we don't have the luxury not to have these bold decisions. We want to hold on to our business. We don't want to give in and partner up with other people. I think it's critical to be bold at this time and to actually make these leaps of faith, because that's what will enable everybody to win. But it can't be a win-lose situation. It has to be a win-win for everybody. So very valuable. Questions from everybody. I don't know how to unmute everyone. Let me figure it out as we're doing it, but please, if you have any questions, go ahead. Okay. All right, I was able to mute everybody, but let's see. I'm not able to unmute everyone. So, okay, whoever wants to ask a question, please unmute yourself.
Shuja is tempted, but he's still hesitant.
Yeah.
Hi, Maher, how are you?
I'm great. How about yourself? How are you doing?
Very nice. Lovely talk. Thank you for sharing.
Pleasure. Thank you.
One of the points you were saying earlier, which is about this iterative decision-making process, 100% agree that as we learn more information, we have to change direction. And then you mentioned communicating with the team, certainly the senior team, very, very regularly. The idea of informing the people within hours of the executive knowing is excellent. I know very few places that do that. They're so guarded about that information and so worried that they wait too long and then information slips. And then people think that you're not being genuine or honest. So I think that's a really good idea.
Agreed. I have always learned since early on, if you want to win your team, you need to make sure that you're very transparent to them. They should be able to see through and understand what is the message and what's the focus all about. And I think that clarity brought about belongingness and loyalty. And when they saw that thing, they were able to give in much more that you can think and ask for. And that was the paramount for me, because a lot of people believe that people is the assets. I think every leaders, when they actually make sure people are taken care of in the right manner, from being humble, I think this is what would increase the loyalty of your workforce, of your employees to the organization. And once that happens, it becomes so cemented that, your DNA, all of you become at one DNA, and then you go as one rocket actually launching, getting things done. The power of that is so immense and strong. I witnessed it so many times that, it's a team which is just running and marching. You cannot stop them.
And you push that down to beyond the senior team, right down to all the employees? So it's cascaded down, or you tend to keep that with you and your senior, what we call senior executive team, or the top management?
It has to be across everybody in the organization, because it's everybody is chipping in the organization. So what we used to do, and I also, to be honest with you, learned it through a lot of things. It's speak to every single body. And I've learned it from I think one of the leaders I learned it from, Selma and I probably remember him, Ahmed bin Break. He was our CEO in Citibank's time.
Yeah.
He actually would go and shake hands with everybody.
Yeah.
When he comes back from vacation, he would go around the bank. Okay, the bank was relatively small over there, so he could actually do a good turnaround. But it was hats off to him, being a CEO of the company. He would go every branch and shake off with everybody's hands, go to every single department, and he would know them almost by names. And that was so touchy, to be honest with you. So I think that's something I picked it up from him, to be honest with you. And I think that communication has to be done across everybody. And one of the things I thought it's important to do, apart from your daily communication, daily interaction with them, the morning huddles were very important for me. So we created something called, one of the approaches Rockefeller used to follow, which is the 3 rock approaches. So we would make a morning huddle for 10 minutes at best. And we discuss 5 things over there. What are the focus of the day? What are our KPIs? Can we share some aha moments? And those aha moments could be personal, could be work related. So that created bonding. And respectively, every team, every leader in the team would do the same thing with their own team. So the entire organization is clear now. What is the focus and what's the vision of the organization? So there was transparency, and there was reiteration of the same messages. If you recall what I said, people only one third of the people only listen to you, the rest don't. But when you do this thing every day in the morning, And we actually used to do it in a very awkward hour. We used to do it 8:08. So it's not at 8 o'clock sharp or 8:30. We used to do it at 8:08. And they said, psychologist says that this is something like a mind breaking, so for people to come. And we used to do it as standing thing. So it used to be in a standing coffee that we discussed this thing. So everybody would be aware. And one of the important things we did as well, apart from the morning huddles, without a fail, in my all the previous organization, I used to do a town hall every quarter. So in Dubai Bank, I did that. In my experience of Emirates MBD, I did that. Even during crisis, I made sure the town hall is very important, because it was town hall by the people, for the people. It was me not coming and presenting. It is them enjoying, celebrating whatever they have done and sharing with each other. So that also created bondness between the various teams we had. So that was very important.
So how can we do that? How do you translate that with a remotely? I mean, can you do this like daily huddle over Zoom? You know,
sure. Very good question, Selma. Now, prior the current crisis, we did use, I would say Zoom was not really famous, but we did use some video conferencing. And we kind of said, yes, this video conferencing is there, it's very good, but we still believe in human interaction. We still believe in face-to-face seeing and recognition. But look at us today, 2 months fast forward, we're all communicating through Zooms. Look at us, how we are communicating with all the beautiful people over here, and we're able to share information. Not only us, you have leaders of countries are actually using the technology which is available today to do. So I think, yes, the short answer to your question would be yes, we should be able to do that thing, because now, honestly speaking, Zoom became a second culture. When I want to call up my mother who's living in a different city, I actually Zoom her up. So if I want to talk to my niece and my cousins and all these things, we actually use Zoom. So it becomes a second nature. So same thing we applied in our work. Okay. So I think that was the wind or something. All right. So coming back, so when we went back to homes because of the disinfection period and we were not able to go to the offices, we did not do a morning huddle, but we actually did like every 2 days a catch up through Zoom. So update on businesses and all this thing. So we kept the communication flow going on, and that kept everybody kind of aware of what's happening in the company.
Okay, great. Very useful. Thank you. We have a hand there, I think, Haifa. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Anna, بالwind. I went outside. I'm trying to get into a less windy area.
Okay, we
can you hear me if I ask the question?
Yes,
we can hear you. There's no wind around, yes.
Oh, okay, perfect. Sorry. So the question is, as an entrepreneur who is obviously suffering in this pandemic, and after like 4 months, almost no income, I'm in the beauty industry. Would you recommend taking it slow and let it pass with the minimum expenses, since we are already a technology, and then like as long as the time passes and this crisis will pass, then I can continue? Or should we do something different now, immediately?
Okay.
Or it's okay to think إنه نوطي على العاطفة لا تعدي.
Okay. Thank you for the question, Haifa. If I'm not mistaken, you're talking about you're in beauty industry and also technology, both two industries?
Yeah, we're a beauty app. So like we provide services, at-home services. And we're still going on. We're launching men grooming. We are expanding our services, but we're not doing so well now. Like during the pandemic, home service was not allowed. They just re-allowed it around a month ago. But people are still either skeptical or scared, or even, as you mentioned, a lot lost their jobs. So they're not that keen on doing their mani-pedi or hair. Like beauty is not a necessity.
Okay. Haifa, to tailor-made the answer to you, I would definitely need to understand quite a lot about your organization, but to make it generally speaking, few points to note. First of all, you need to see how much cash reserve you have available today, and how can you conserve that, and then how long will it last you in terms of number of months. then you need to look at your expenses. What are the expenses you need to really cut off? And I've also learned this throughout my career. Sometimes when things are moving very well, we do allow certain expenses to happen, and we're okay with it.
Absolutely.
But this situation makes you rethink again for every single penny, and I mean it, every single penny to be accounted for, and why do you need to spend it? And can you find an alternative of having this spent differently? So if you
Absolutely.
look at
We did that, and we're doing different revenue streams. We're doing online courses. We're trying that. But is it okay to take it easy and not to feel super bad? If you can survive until, let's say, end of 2020 and have a plan, in 2021, you will reboot, come up with new, better ideas and invest more in the business. Is this the right way, or cut the costs now and get out of this business?
Sure. I don't think I would advise you to cut out of the business. Again, not knowing your fully business model and how revenue streams are worked out, but I wouldn't honestly advise that unless I know what's really happening in the company. But I can hear from you that you, first of all, are making certain strides and you have created certain new revenue streams. And if these revenue streams are actually effective and good and sustainable, even if they're small, so and keeping you afloat, then you stay there, stay the course. That's point number one. Point number two, you've also said that you have new ideas of new things to be done. Of course, these new ideas may require some investment to be done over there. However, if you do these things over a different model, for example, you wanted to do this thing on face-to-face, for example, but if you can't do these things on using a platform or this business idea where you can shift the expense or capital, if it's a capital intense and you change it, say, no, let me do it this way, and you still launch the idea, for example, maybe you can launch 20 or 30, 40% of the idea and you still make a revenue stream from it. When the things and crises are kind of over and dissipated, then you probably open up the idea fully and then you go 100% operational. But I usually would never advocate that you close down without knowing even your business model. But from what I heard from you, I would say keep on going on.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the whole session. It was really informative and a lot of good information in leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Haifa. We have another hand going up. Ayman, go ahead, Ayman.
Hello all, and thanks a lot for this session. Actually, it was very beneficial. Mr. Maher, you already discussed most of the important points, but a question about how much we need flexibility in companies to be proactive with the changes as fast as the market is going, because usually you are faced with your team, you are faced with the politics and the bureaucracy that the company has in the environment usually, and this prohibits the change. So how could you keep up, let's say in a medium company and above, how could you keep an environment of entrepreneurship more than an environment of bureaucracy that is less flexible to adverse with the changes in the market?
Sure. I think you mentioned a very key thing over here. If in an organization or an entrepreneur company you are in and you are facing certain challenges with the leaders of the company, then it is a very challenging situation for these companies to move forward. Because remember, we said, what is the role of leaders to make us stay afloat? If the leaders themselves are not engaging and not doing anything and actually not making it happen, it will be very challenging. But of course, what is it that as employees we need to do then in that case? So it's all about then we take, I wouldn't say taking control, but we actually approach the leadership along with the employees and come up something with kind of a positive solution or recommendation for the leaders. Probably, maybe we're viewing them differently. I always think the glass is half full. Yes, I would do not, discount what you have said, but let's think of it positively. Difficult said than done, but it's a worth trying situation where you all as an employees together, gather together out, you think it among yourself, saying it, okay, we're an organization, we know what we're doing, what is it we can do and brainstorm that we can make this company afloat. Once you have crystallized an idea and approach, but mind you need to do it very quickly because the crises are happening as we speak, then take this recommendation to the leaders of the company. Let the leaders of the company see what, as you employees working over there, can do differently. Perhaps some clicking will happen and maybe they will say, okay, this makes a lot of sense and we want to do it. And this is without knowing the situation fully of your company.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Any other? Go ahead.
Meher, just to your comment, I would add that I think a lot of employees think that the leadership has the answers, and leaders are happy to listen to their employees. And you were giving the example of the executive who literally shakes hands with everyone, but he finds out. But if there's a forum to create to allow that managerial layer or below to come up with ideas, I do think culturally in the UAE, say, compared to US, the lower ranking employee finds it hard to make their voice heard. But certainly with the leadership that I've dealt with in the country, they're willing to hear. They want to hear from the grassroots, basically.
True. Couldn't agree more with you. You're right. Absolutely right. And I think creating a forum where ideas can be heard. I witnessed of that thing in my previous organization where people have created various and different programs of letting people come up with ideas. And when ideas were implemented or could be implemented, people were recognized and that actually put a positive ripple effect on the rest of the team. So important is not having, we used to say we have an idea box. But I've seen also sometimes the idea box never opened, to be honest with you. So a lot of ideas were lined over there. So it was leaders who made sure that they want to make sure that the people are engaged in the interests of the organization. So they made sure the ideas are there. They were the committee opening the ideas and look at it. And the cycle back of feedback to every single person who gave an idea and thank you note to them and saying, look, this is the idea. We've looked at it now. We think this is applicable now and we want to implement it. So why don't you come up and let's discuss even more? And this is the ideas we think it is not suitable at this point of time because of these following reason and probably we'll do later on. That actually makes the company flourish. So I couldn't agree with you more. And getting an idea, a forum where people can come up with ideas is an amazing thing to do.
And let's not, maybe even with Ayman, I think to your point, even if you are in a company where traditionally people were not open to new ideas, in times like this, in uncertain times where nobody has the answers, like Dr. Shuja was saying, people become more open to listening. So even if we have that impression that, traditionally people have not listened and we are in organizations that actually don't listen because they know what they how they're driving this organization forward. In times of uncertainty, like the times we're living in, when people don't have the answers and so on, they become more open to having discussions and ideas. So I would concur with both of you that you need to be proactive. Make your voice heard. Come up and be part of recreating and designing the future. We all need that. We all need to take part and be intentional about, creating this this new normal or whatever is next or the future that we need to all be living in. So we have space for one more question because it's already 7. I don't know how it's already 7 o'clock, but this has been very, very informative and really enlightening. Any more questions or comments from any of you before we wrap up? Final words, Maher, as we wrap up this workshop.
Sure. Before that, I just wanted to tell everybody that Selma was the person I remember actually giving me one of the awards, Eureka Award, we used to call it in Citibank, if you remember. So you were in charge of that. So she was the person behind actually encouraging people come up with ideas, looking at the ideas and actually then saying, okay, this idea can be implemented, we'll implement it and reward people accordingly. So she's an advocate and actual practitioner of that. So Selma is the person.
Open the box. I always open the box.
I think.
Yeah, I definitely don't think anybody, no matter how seasoned they are and so on, can have all the answers at any point in time. And I think, always, encouraging people to speak up and having that environment where people are free to basically advocate and come up and innovate and become involved in innovation and coming up with ideas is so important.
That is true. Yeah, I think, again, to reiterate some of the messages we talked about and resonate them again, we need to be very agile at these points of times. We need to be recognizing what we're going through. We have we need to make sure, as the leaders need to make sure that they cannot survive alone. They have to have a strong nervous system. They need to communicate again and again and again and over again. Over communication is the key for this time. And I think once this crisis are over, people need to also recognize the communication does not stop, because now the messaging will be different, because then you'll be in a recovery mode, and then they need to realize, okay, what need to be do next, because your nervous system team, which you have created, they have to assume a different role. They're probably going to go back to their BAUs. So you have to then redo the things again and come up with different things to make sure the company is in the recovery path. So the journey continues, never ends over here once it's behind us. And that will be another episode probably we can talk about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Maher, many, many thanks for a wonderful webinar full of tools, for sharing your experience of what works and what doesn't work. I think we're all leaving this discussion and conversation tonight with lots to think about and ways forward. So on behalf of everybody who's attended, thank you so much for your time today, for lending your experience and knowledge and expertise. And we will continue, inshallah, putting on these webinars to help everybody, get access to information and advice, and bring people, reputed leaders like yourself, on board to lend their experience and to share the tools that are needed to take us through this crisis and to see us through. So many thanks to everybody who attended today, and thanks for your engagement and questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
See you soon.